Good morning to baristas. This ML King Day, we're going to again hear the famous quote from his I Have a Dream speech of the day when the children of this nation, all of them, not just his own, will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. A newer version of By Their Deeds Shall You Know Them. As this election year progresses, or moves along anyway, we're going to hear some other advice, namely that we should judge President Obama by his color content first. Specifically in The Nation of January 9, a review by Charles Taylor of Stephen King's novel 11/22/63, of all things, we find that Charles Taylor ends this review by comparing President Kennedy to President Obama. And he writes on page 37, but to listen to the endless parade of white left commentators who have accused Obama of abandoning his base because he hasn't achieved perfection in politics or in social justice is to realize that the radical right doesn't have a monopoly on the divisiveness Obama's presidency has given rise to. I'm not suggesting that Obama's blackness makes criticizing him off limits, but the reduction of the meaning of Obama solely to his policy decisions, the implicit dismissal of what the fact of Barack Obama means to people who before him never felt they had a voice in American politics, just as the fact of JFK made other people find their political voice for the first time, is not unlike the blindness Stephen King captures in his novel 11/22/63. Well, that may be relevant for Stephen King, but this is not the color blindness of Dr. King. Despite Taylor's disclaimer, we are being asked to judge President Obama first and foremost by his black presence in the White House. But to not reduce the meaning of his presidency solely to policy decisions, like his record, the content of his character as chief executive, leaves us with what else but symbolism? What else can a president be judged on? Lincoln and FDR are not judged as great presidents just because they made us feel good about ourselves, but because of what they accomplished. And do those people of color who never had a voice in the highest reaches of power before 2008 really have any louder say after 2008? So let me add my own disclaimer. That I recognize the historic event Obama's election was, that blacks and all Americans of non-white epidermis feel accomplishment and pride at seeing him stand before the world under the presidential shield of the United States, that much of the sniping at him from the GOP and Fox News is race-based, and that the North and West are as bad as the South about this. But the line of reasoning, look at the man's color, not his record, is to me fundamentally flawed. It's moral blackmail, designed to avoid a hard look at the president's record, and for that reason it fails epically. I take no pleasure in saying so. I wish it were different. And I guarantee that you would not have heard this line from these same progressives of color or not if in 2008 Hillary Clinton had won the Democratic nomination and the GOP had persuaded Condoleezza Rice to run for them. Whether she would have won or not, these same progressive folk would be sternly reminding us to look past her gender and color, not to get hung up on politically correct images, to judge her by her record and values, her policy decisions, in other words. Not to swallow the hucksterism being perpetrated by her party managers that just putting her face in the White House will in itself empower the poor millions who resemble her in color and gender. What matters is what they do, not what they say, and certainly not what they merely symbolize. Symbols can be false or falsely used. The symbol has no meaning if it fails to live up to the value placed on it. If Obama's election as the first black president is supposed to symbolize meaningful change in American society and government and economy, then, again, it has failed, and worse than the failures of someone who does not symbolize anything new. Therefore, the attempt to hide Barack Obama's betrayal of his voting base by hiding him behind his color cannot be accepted. If his color is supposed to symbolize change, then better to blind yourself to it. Granted, your alleged choices this fall may not amount to much in practice, but when you vote this November, if you vote, let's remember what another presidential candidate said in the election of 1928, Governor Al Smith of New York. Let's look at the record. So let's look at President Obama's record and see if we can find what he's actually done to give a voice to the voiceless. Is it approving a 4-year extension of the Patriot Act? Militarization of the police, including the use of domestic drone craft? An increase in wiretap surveillance? And domestic surveillance overall? And prosecution of Julius Assange and Bradley Manning over WikiLeaks? And the punitive measures taken against it and anyone doing business with it? Punishing other whistleblowers under the Espionage Act? Don't seem to find it there, not in any of those. Well, how about authorizing the assassination of an American citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki? Don't see it there, even if it was okayed under special circumstances and special dispensation, of course. But you know as well as I do that what's allowed once under special circumstances will evolve into routine once that line's been crossed. As with any killer, it's always the first victim that comes hardest. That seems exceptional. There's always a next time, and that only gets easier each time. So, what else has he done that gives a voice to the voiceless? Was it his standing up for his party's single-payer public health plan? No, he dealt that away in a backroom Washington game. Was it his standing up to the Wall Street fraudsters? No, he wrote them a blank check of your money after they'd already stolen you blind. Was it his condemnation of the Citizens United Supreme Court decision that gave a voice to fictitious entities over the real people in the hoods and projects who don't know where their next job is coming from, maybe their next meal, if this depression continues? No, that can't be it either. Yes, the best thing Barack Obama's defenders can do for him is not emphasize his color and his symbolism, because you can't see his face anyway for all the egg he's allowed to accumulate there. Debates on the limits of torture and assassination are like debates on the limits of lynching, ones that we shouldn't even be having, and that we're conducting them under a black president should once and for all bury this kind of knee-jerk guilt-tripping by Charles Taylor or anyone. There are signs that Obama may be coming around, getting off his kumbaya and understanding that politics is war by other means. This again may be just election year manipulation, so I wouldn't put much stock in it. Even if you feel you must hold your nose and vote for Obama anyway, because of the alternative, just remember that real hope of progress in Obama's term has originated not in Washington, not in Congress, not the White House, not the Supreme Court, God no, none of the bought and paid for branches of state that supposedly constitute the North American democracy. Certainly not in the shadow regime of CIA, FBI, Homeland Security. It's come from ordinary, everyday working folks who say, enough! Enough of this shit already. The ones who occupy the state capital of Wisconsin against a local power-mad tyrant trying to destroy the rights and rewards of labor. The ones who occupy Liberty Plaza in New York and turn thousands of other plazas and parks in the USA into zones of liberty, however briefly. The ones who are fighting their evictions as deadbeat millionaires hide the ill-gotten gains offshore and expect even more bailouts, more tax cuts. These people have been the voice of change, not some symbolic cutout figure. If there is any hope of change after 2012, with Obama or without him, it will come from Main Street, not Wall Street, not Pennsylvania Avenue. The mainstream media lectures places like Russia for its managed democracy, but what in the hell do you think you have in Washington? The system has been gamed out long ago. It's just as sclerotic, just as unresponsive, just as self-serving as any regime in the Kremlin. Uh-oh. Knock on the phone, interrupting my rant. Hello? Who? Alexei Navalny, one of the leaders of the Occupy Moscow movement. You're calling from Lubyanka jail where they stuck you to remind us of what you said at the December 10th, 2011 rally. What's that? Oh, I can find it in that same issue of The Nation at the other end on page 4. No, I'm not finding it on page 4. Where's it at? Page 6. Oh, what's on page 6 that I have to read? Okay, hold on, I'm getting there. I'm getting there. Everyone has the most powerful weapon that we need, dignity, the feeling of self-respect. It's impossible to beat and arrest hundreds of thousands, millions. We have not even been intimidated. For some time we were simply convinced that the life of toads and rats, the life of mute cattle, was the only way to win the reward of stability and economic growth. We are not cattle or slaves. We have voices and votes, and we have the power to uphold them. Well, granted your Russian hyperbole, you're right. We have the power to uphold our voices and our votes. So we have to do the speaking, not passively wait upon some anointed great symbolic leader to do it for us. No wonder you're at the opposite end from Obama, but at least your words are in front where they belong.